When I was a kid, my father took me to an air show. My dad was a weatherman, and he took me to an air show in Turnhouse. I must have been about 4 or 5, I guess. And I remember seeing the red arrows. And they were flying gnats in those days. I remember that as well. And that really started the interest in aeroplanes. And I think I went through the common thing that all boys go through with airfix kits, and, you know, some kids want to be a fireman, some kids want to be a train driver. I always wanted to fly aeroplanes. Now, the interest I had in aeroplanes wavered between commercial and helicopters and fast jets, and at about the time I was ready to make a decision to join the Air Force, it had planted itself firmly on the fast jet stage. I joined the Air Force in 1981. However, I was in the ATC cadets from the age of 13, which at the time, and I still think this, you know, it's the youth organisation that for air-minded people, it's ideal. It allows you to get in touch with aeroplanes from the age of 13, and the Air Force runs this organisation for the youth who want a career in flying or associated with aircraft. And, you know, it lets you go flying, it lets you handle a gun, you know, canoeing, outdoors sports and activities like that. Fabulous organisation, really. So I joined when I was 13, and I got a flying scholarship at 17. I just turned 17. I went down to Biggin Hill for the aptitude test for a flying scholarship, and again I fell on my feet. I was really lucky and got one. So I was about 17 and a half, or 17 and 3 months or something, and went to Leicester Aero Club to do my flying scholarship, and I was there for, I suppose, 3.5 full weeks in the summer, during the summer holidays, while I was still at school. I mean, I was still, you know, at high school. And I did a flying scholarship, and which paid for 7/8 of the flying hours required for a private pilot's license. Had to find a bit of money at the end of it to fund the last few hours or so. But, you know, there I was, sort of 17 years old with a pilot's license in my hand. It was here, wow. You know, it was great, terrific. And that was the sort of start of the road. And I then finished high school a year later, and I didn't really have the desire to go on to university. I wanted to get on with a career, and, you know, I'd done a flying scholarship, I'd got a taste of flying. And the next thing I didn't want to do was do another 3 years of sitting on the ground when I could be in the cockpit. So my plan really was, and the plan I fulfilled was get in and get on with it. And so, there I was, fresh-faced youth at 18, knocking on the door at the Careers Information Office in Ipswich, saying, I want to be a pilot in the Air Force. And I had my flying scholarship and I had my private pilot's license, and they sent me down to Biggin Hill for more aptitude tests, which fortunately I passed. And I got a place at Cranwell 3 weeks after leaving school in 1981. The Jaguar is a difficult aeroplane to quantify or qualify from its performance alone. It lives really in a world of its own. I mean, it's combat proven from the Gulf War, so it's been there. All right, it is day only, albeit this year a night capability is being introduced. But conventionally, it's day only. Away from the display scene, we're talking about its combat type performance. Yes, it's not a turning aeroplane, but the biggest advantage, the biggest plus for the Jaguar is its deployability. The aeroplane is notoriously serviceable. It very rarely breaks down. It is also deployable. When they designed the Jaguar Force in the 70s, they made sure that it was ready to get up and go worldwide at short notice. Proven in 1990 by the deployment to the Middle East at the beginning of the Gulf conflict. 72 hours up and across a quarter of the world into the Middle East. There isn't another force in the Royal Air Force that could do that. And I'm not just talking about the aeroplanes, I'm talking about all the support equipment. It's all mobile. You shove all this stuff into the back of a hook and go. The aeroplanes, they either go in front or follow on behind, and people are in place just about anywhere in the world within 3 days. Easy, been proven. When you get there, you've got an aeroplane that doesn't break down. You do need spares, obviously, but the aeroplane, you can get hatches off, replace bits, and go. So I can't remember the statistic off the top of my head, but its reliability during the war was something like 98%, unheard of. Amazing statistic. So a reliable aeroplane, something you can depend on. It's going to be there. It's going to put its bombs on target. Thank you very much. One of the problems we have when we're operating the Jaguar away from home base is the fact that the cockpit's so high up, 10 feet, and when you haven't got a purpose-built ladder, or indeed no ladder at all, it's often quite difficult to get into the cockpit. The simple way is you have 2 access panels here for your feet, but you need to jump on the nose wheel and jump up first of all, so you have to be quite an athlete. Coming forward, we've got 2 access panels which contain, inside which there is equipment, including the avionics, and specifically the inertial platform for navigation and weapon aiming, air conditioning package, and forward of that is the laser itself. More about that in a moment. On the side here you can see 3 probes. These 2 are largely irrelevant, but this one here is special because it's the angle of attack probe itself, and this gives you pilot information of the angle of attack of the aircraft. The angle of attack being the angle between the wing line and the relative airflow. The glass section in the front houses the laser. The laser is used to measure accurate slant range from the front of the aircraft to the ground, and therefore giving you, through simple trigonometry, accurate weapon aiming solution for weapons delivery. Forward of this, we've got the pitot probe on a long extension. This is because the air in front of the aircraft is affected by the fact the aircraft's coming towards it. The molecules are already separating, and that's why you need a big long arm before you have the pressure sensor present. Hole in the front to measure dynamic pressure, holes in the side to measure static pressure, and that's for essentially airspeed. Inside this panel you can see the oxygen bottle. The oxygen contents of the aircraft serve 2 purposes. Firstly, for normal breathing. When you go to high level you need more and more oxygen because the air's thinner, and also, and secondary and very important for the display itself, is it also provides anti-G. I wear a special set of trousers which inflate under G to encourage the blood to stay in the top half of my body, and that's supplied by oxygen from the oxygen system. The Jaguar nose wheel, single nose wheel, has a facility that we call nose wheel steering. It's hydraulically powered and sits in this section here, which allows you from the inside to use the rudder pedals to actually steer the nose wheel itself rather than braking to turn the aeroplane. And it means it's also, because it's hydraulically powered, it's very powerful, and you can turn the aircraft in very little over its actual length, so you can turn in very confined spaces. When the Jaguar was first designed, the French intended to use it on aircraft carriers. So when they designed the undercarriage, they made it big and beefy, and it's remained the same to this day. Double wheels each side and a big, strong undercarriage. The advantage we have these days are when people are first learning to fly and they hit the ground a little bit firmly, there's no real problem because the undercarriage can withstand the impact very easily. If you look here, you can see a wing fence. What happens if, when the aircraft goes through the air, at the root area you get a vortex generating, and because of the shape of the wing, the air tends to want to run down the front of it to the tip, and there occurs a very large vortex, and a vortex equals drag. It's inefficient. And what the designers have done is put a wing fence here to try and discourage the spanwise flow of air to the tip. Underneath, we've left on the pylon to try and discourage that further. The rest of the pylons on the display aircraft have been stripped. There's normally one inboard, one on the centerline, and two like this on the other side. On the leading edge of the wing, we've got a slat. This extends to increase the surface area of the wing and encourage lift to be produced by the wing itself. The engines are two Rolls-Royce Jaguar engines, 5,500 pounds of static thrust in dry power, which increases to 8,300 in reheat power. At the back of the engine you can see the reheat bay with the nozzle here, and inside you can see the burner rings where they spray raw fuel onto the flame to increase the thrust by 30-odd%. If we have to land the aircraft fast or stop it in a short distance, we can help ourselves by using the brake chute. The brake chute is contained in the rear section of the aircraft here, and is covered by this noddy cap. It's operated by a handle in the cockpit. After pulling the handle, the noddy cap comes off and the brake chute extends out of the back. It's anchored to the aircraft by the anchor point you can see above the noddy cap. In an emergency, most military airfields have what they call a rag, and it's a wire laid across the runway, usually at either end. In an emergency, there's another lever in the cockpit that we can pull to lower the hook. The hook extends all the way down and is sprung loaded between the engines. Upon pulling the handle, the hook drops down, hits the ground, and hopefully catches the arrestor wire and stops the aircraft. The tailplane is not conventional to most aeroplanes. Most aeroplanes have elevators. The tailplane on the Jaguar is all moving, so the whole tail moves up and down conventionally, which makes it very powerful. In addition, it's also a differential tailplane, so it can differentiate, assisting the aircraft's rolling performance. These barn doors are the air brakes. They're very efficient and are selected from a switch inside the cockpit on the throttles. However, more interestingly, inside the air brake bay on the left-hand side is the microturbo, which is essentially an auxiliary power unit which we start up prior to starting the engines, and they feed both engines with enough air to get them turning in the right direction and get the rotation going essentially. The intakes, large box intakes, and you can see how high they are above the ground. I'm 6 foot tall, and that's even above me. The big advantage of this is it's anti-FOD. FOD stands for foreign object damage, which means that it's reluctant to pick up stones or pieces of wood and stuff like that off the ground, which can damage the engines on some aircraft like the F-16, where the intake sits below the fuselage. Big advantage of this. Also, to help the aircraft roll, the Jaguar doesn't actually have ailerons like a conventional aircraft either. It has spoilers, and that's these two sections here, and it does what it says it does. It spoils the airflow. So when the aircraft wants to be rolled, the stick moves, the spoilers come up and disrupt the airflow over this wing. On the other wing, the airflow is still sound, so the aircraft rolls assisted by the differential tailplane. To the back of this, where ailerons would be on a conventional aircraft, are the full span flaps, called Fowler flaps, and they're split and they're very efficient. The outboard section hangs down to 20 degrees and the inboard section down to 40 degrees. On the fin at the top, this horizontal bar is the radar warning receiver. If a ground radar station, or indeed an aircraft radar, illuminates the aircraft, it's received by sensors in this compartment. They're then processed and fed through to a warner in the cockpit to tell the pilot that he's being illuminated. July 1984 was the start of my conversion course here. And we had a couple of weeks in ground school. In those days, there were 2 of us on the course, I remember, and we had a couple of weeks at ground school.